Hey, Howard Jacobson here. Welcome to today's Plant Yourself podcast. A quick reminder, this podcast is free for everyone and supported by patrons. So if you would like to find out about becoming a patron of the show and helping us out, helping defray the cost, helping to spread the message, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. Thanks so much and enjoy today's episode. Hey, welcome to Plant Yourself. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Today, shit gets real. So let's bring in a little shit gets real music to set the stage. I reached out to today's podcast guests, Bianca and Michael Alexander, because I was turning into an asshole. And basically the problem is, I am a good guy. I'm an anti-racist. I support Black Lives Matter. I support the kind of changes that we need in the world. I'm furious and frustrated at systemic racism. And I didn't like how it felt to be that angry. And not only that, my feelings are less important than social justice, you could argue, but more than that, all this anger I don't think it was helping. It wasn't centering me. It wasn't making me more powerful. It was just making me another voice in a giant maelstrom of name calling on social media. It was alienating me from people in my own community who are not terrible people, even if I don't agree with them on lots of things. And so I reached out to Bianca and Michael for a couple of reasons. First of all, they've been on the show before, and they were talking about the journey of conscious living. So I thought I could use me some conscious living right now. But also, Bianca is Black, Michael is white. They are a couple. And recently they published a blog post about Bianca's experience as a 3-year-old. And the blog post was called "The First Time I Was Called a N-Word." And hearing from these two people whom I've always thought of as sort of paragons of transcendent spirituality, that they're living in a very real world of racism in which it's systemic, it's political, and it's also deeply personal. I wanted some guidance from them about how to think about being as loving, as helpful, as powerful as I could be, to be an ally without turning it into a performative dance of my own injured feelings or my own outrage, to make it less about me and more about how to be helpful from both a social action and spiritual action perspective. So that's the conversation we are about to have. Before we get there, just a couple of quick messages. First one is, if you like the show and you like the mission and you'd like more people to hear it, 2 ways to do that are to write a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a little bit of cash that you can spare to help support the financial goals of the show, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. Second, if this has been a tough 6 months of COVID and you'd like to get some control over your health behaviors, maybe you've let them slide, maybe situations have changed, old systems and patterns that supported good behaviors have eroded. I offer coaching, both individual and group coaching. And you can find out about the individual coaching at plantyourself.com/laser. and the group coaching at sicktofit.com/coaching. And you can find both of those links in the show notes for today's episode, which is plantyourself.com/419. All right, let's get to it. Without further ado, Bianca and Michael Alexander, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Hi, thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure.
It's good to be back, Howard.
Yeah, so I wanted to have a conversation with you that I think it's going to be challenging for me. And let me just share where I'm coming from and why I thought of you guys. So as you probably know, there's sort of a social and political maelstrom happening, right? Like in the country, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of factionalism, and I see myself as a very sort of, moral, righteous, progressive person. And I want to be on the right side and I want to do the right thing. And I found myself, more so than any other time in my life, with the protests for racial justice, becoming incredibly angry, incredibly opinionated, judgmental, divisive, and feeling really good about it. Like I was like just on a tear, just like, F you all. This, like normally when I get mad, I feel bad afterwards, like, I overreacted. But there was something about participating in these marches, in saying, you know what, like I want to fight against systemic racism. I want to be a part of the solution. That kind of gave me sort of internal permission to really, to not to put too fine a point on it, turn into an aggressive, outrageous asshole who was helping nobody or nothing. And, like partly it's my fight and partly it's not.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I saw you guys who sent out an email, the subject line of which I'm not even qualified to speak. And I thought, like, the last time we talked on the podcast, you guys were really talking about sort of consciousness and spirituality and love. And I'm like, how the hell do they do it? And are they doing it now? And can we solve social, political problems in this climate while still paying allegiance to consciousness, to love, to universality, to you and me being the same, when in so many ways on this plane we are different. So that's probably the longest introduction I've ever given. So I want to shut up and just let you guys help me.
Well, do you want to kick it off? Well, let me just say, first of all, like, thank you so much just for your transparency and your honesty and your willingness to be vulnerable and like being honest about what your journey and your experience has been. Do you understand how hard that is and how much courage that takes to show up in the world as a white, as if any of us is white? You're not white, you're more peachy pink. That's what I tell Michael. But as a white man at this time to show up and just be honest about where you are and where you aren't. Like, hello, that is the beginning of the conversation that I feel we've all been missing. It's just the honesty and the humility and the willingness to share where you are, I think, is just so powerful and so beautiful. So thank you for kicking it off with that.
Well, my first reaction is like, it doesn't feel brave necessarily. And I know the only reason I can do it is because of a lot of spiritual work that I've done in the past that had nothing to do with this necessarily.
Right.
Right. So that's one answer. You've just reflected back to me that, like, how spirituality has a place in this. So thank you.
There's your answer.
and I'll just say this, Howard, is I think, I'm glad to hear that you were participating in the marches and I too felt very, I'll call righteous indignation. And there was a sense of, I remember there was days on end as the marches were happening that I would just go out in my backyard and I would play, my favorite band, Beautiful Chorus, and I would just sob for, lap after lap after lap after lap because of, just because of the pain body. And this is really what has been a conversation that we've been having since we've been together, is that I grew up in San Francisco and I had my roommate in college for 3 years and my best friend was black. I was a first generation hip hop head and said the N-word thousands, if not millions of times every time I sang my favorite songs and rapped my favorite songs. And yet when we got together, I really had to, I was resistant to the idea that I was racist. Mm-hmm. And I was resistant to the idea that I even saw color.
Uh-huh.
I was like, no, I don't see color. I'm not racist.
And what are you black people so mad about? Like, you're like, I just don't get why you're like so angry. He literally did. He was clueless.
Uh-huh.
It's like, you listen to hip hop and you say the N-word and you know all the words to the best R&B songs and
Yeah, here's my resume, right?
Yeah, like right? You like your black card, or my best friend in college. My best friends are black. Some of my best friends are black. My roommate was black. Okay, you got your black card, bam. And yet you have no real connection or understanding of where the fact that there is a pain body and why there is a pain body. And
so could you define that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a pain body is like trauma, right? And, we connect to and accept and sort of validate that trauma can happen to people who've, been to war, or people that have been, abused, or people that have suffered, like a severe physical trauma, an accident. But the emotional trauma, the emotional pain body, I call, is not just, from systemic institutional racism for 400 plus years, for colonialism, for, eternity, imperialism. There's so many sort of isms driven by money and capitalism and patriarchy and white privilege and what Michael has now termed senseless white pride. That's like our little meme of the senseless white pride, meme of the week. Mostly me saying it to him,
yes,
and referring to himself in that way. But as not as an excuse, but hopefully as a way to kind of identify oneself on the trajectory of where we are inside of the pain body. And it's not just Black people and descendants of slaves who've suffered the pain body that I experience when I think of my parents and like the silent generation, and the fact that my parents drank out of black water fountains and had to sit in the nosebleed sections of every theater, and when they drove from the north to the south, they couldn't stop on the side of the road like we're going to do, in our Tesla, making plug-in stops and having,
yes, right, no green book.
There was no green book, and so for them it was like, you basically pee on the side of the road, and you better bring your fried chicken basket with you and eat out of it, because there ain't no way you're sitting at anybody's counter, and it's going to be 12 hours. And, you may want to, you may think you have a right to, but you could get hung for doing that in certain parts, of the South. So that reality is something I never experienced. And that pain body, the traumatic emotional sort of response, suppressed often, because who are you going to tell? Who are you going to complain about it? A society that doesn't care. You know what I mean? It's like that's held in your psyche, in your subconscious, in your posture, in your way of being in the world. I think about my parents, and anytime that we, I have a Leo rising, so anytime I was going anywhere, I was always like, okay, front row, room service, like, I'm here, I never thought about it. And my parents were always like, well, let's always put, in the back, and just sort of, kind of like the church mice. And I always just couldn't understand that. And I thought, well, what must it have been like to walk down the street and feel like, you better bow your head, boy, or don't look me in the eye, So that's the pain body with respect to Black people. White people too have a pain body, because, I always say, like many philosophers, those on opposite sides of the gun share the same fate, right? So we're all in that dynamic. We're all in that consciousness. We're all in that vibration of oppression and inequality and injustice. And that is the pain body that we as Americans share, that white people, that Black people, that Native Americans, that anybody that has set foot on American soil and, sort of participated in the economic, social, cultural sort of exchange is affected by what I call the racial pain body. And that is something that must be addressed and healed. And I feel like for the first time in my lifetime, even, after Barack Obama was elected president, we are beginning to actually open up and talk about things that have never been talked about. That story I shared about being called a nigger at the age of 3, when I first learned the word, had no idea what it was, that's a story that I kept inside for decades. And there was something about this culture, this moment where we can open up and talk about it and know that there's people that are actually interested in hearing it and aren't going to suppress it and say, oh, well, you're being sensitive. Oh, don't be funny. I don't see your color. It doesn't matter. We're all in different place. We're post-racial. That was the whole Obama talk. Now we're in a place where people are like, well, I'm really interested in Black lives do matter, and Black experiences matter, and Black, gay, lesbian, trans lives matter. And all these things that I thought we didn't have permission to sort of to talk about are now coming to the surface. And I feel like you said, there's so much opportunity for healing this pain body, and there's a lot of trauma. And I just think it's a really good sign that we're opening up and allowing ourselves to be seen for who we are, and how the feelings that we've kept inside. And, as opposed to my parents' generation, you just don't talk about anything ever. You just bottle it up. you drink, you grow a tumor, you have a stroke, you silence yourself, but it's still in there, and it's a very unhealthy way to live. So I think we're evolving. That was a very long answer to I don't even know what your question was, but obviously I have a lot of feelings.
He said, "What's the racial pain body?"
Well, there it is. It's multi-layered.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, and let me just say, Howard, this is at least a 600-year-old conversation, because when the slave trade began, it basically began this idea that what's more important than black and brown lives, freedoms, property is white people, is white money, is white property. And basically what began was this great sort of experiment called colonialism, where the entire European people basically said, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to impose basically it was just under the auspices of we need to tame the savages. We're going to go out and we're going to basically take as much money and land and make it ours. And we're going to condone everything from rape to murder to death, all under the auspices of white privilege, frankly, of colonialism. Yeah. And so, America in its essence is the grand experiment, the grand colonial experiment. And so what we're talking about is a 600-year-old pain body for a group of people that have been suppressed systemically for hundreds of years, generation upon generation upon generation upon generation upon generation, simply because of the amount of melanin that they have in their skin. Mm-hmm. And so finally, I think after 600 years, we're coming to this awareness that, hey, it's been 600 years and we need to deal with this. We actually need to have a conversation about this.
Can we just talk about it? The phrase, God bless North Carolina, your home state, Asheville, the very first state to approve reparations. Wow, that's a huge step forward. But, from our perspective, just having a conversation, can we just talk about it? And I feel like these are things that for so long we couldn't even talk about without people feeling judged, and the shame and sort of the whole need to sort of suppress our own humanity. I was watching this series on Netflix. I don't know why I've been obsessed with it. Maybe it's the scientist in my mind, Babies on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's just fascinating about the biology of humanity and, how we become human beings, studied through the lens of babies from birth, up to, toddler, talking, all the different phases of attachment. Anyway, one of the things that was interesting that I personally have experienced and share with some of my friends who aren't white is that, babies learn to be racist at 6 months, and it's because they can see when it's someone that looks like their group, right? There's that moment at 6 months where their brain can, associate, and those that are not. And I've experienced that from little toddlers, particularly in places where there weren't a lot of Black people, like in Asia, where, it was just, they would just see me, they see Michael, and they see me, and it's like,
oh my gosh.
Babies reach out to me, normally it's babe, I get on their level, we have this conversation. So because they weren't exposed, here American babies, it's less of that, but because they were never exposed to, people that look like me in Asia. And let me tell you, some of the worst racism I've ever personally experienced was while living in Asia, in Bali, in Indonesia. Unbelievable, partly because of the lack of education, partly because there's not a lot of African Americans that go there. It's a very patriarchal society, and a society that's the result of very deep and very long recent colonialism by the Dutch. And so inside of that, there's a lot of just pain body, I'll just say. And so seeing Michael and I walking down the street, which is another sort of layer of racism in the pain body of, laws against miscegenation and, seeing people of different races being together, you learn a lot about people when Michael and I walk down the street. I mean, it's the reactions, and it doesn't have to be anything people say, because when I look at him, I just see him, and when he looks at me, he sees me. But it's not until we look in the mirror that we actually are oh, wow, we actually look kind of different, skin tone wise. But what does that feel like when a person who maybe inside feels that white people should be with white people, black people should be with black people, or that the white man did something bad to the black woman, or that a white man belongs with a white woman and white children, and it's like, it brings a lot up for people. And that's the pain body that I think, I feel like that's a part of our mission, just in being married, is that just by walking down the street, not saying a word, there's a healing that's happening that says, yes, this is possible. It doesn't really matter. It's okay. Like, whatever's coming up for you, work through that. That's yours. And let's all step up and, in the words of Gandhi, be the change, and look in our own hearts and begin to, see where we could grow. And that's what this year of 2020 has been about. Like, look inside. You have nowhere else to go. There's a lot of work, and we can point fingers at everybody else, but you've got one finger pointing at the other person, right, when you point, and 4 pointing back at you. So it's like, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that kind of thing. So it's the time to actually start walking our talk, because there's nowhere else to go except it's in introspective.
Yeah. So I really want to get your perspective on, I think it's a dynamic tension between sort of universalism, like you and me are the same, right? We are one. And in this world, it's almost like, if you know the concept of spiritual bypass.
Yes.
Right, where people just want to meditate themselves happy and ignore, suppress any dysfunction, rage, anger, shame, all that. It feels like there's a liberal movement that I would call racial bypass. And I think in the spiritual community, it's very appealing to say, well, look, Bianca, you told me that we are the same. We are all made of God stuff. So why are we having a conversation about our differences?
Yes, beautiful. I think I'm going to let Michael take that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think number one is that, this idea of being colorblind, this idea of not seeing race, and I like racial bypassing, Howard. That idea is, I think part of it is that it is a spiritual bypass, because in and of itself, there is a unwillingness to look at one's shadow and look at how one feels going through the world. So I had to accept that I'm racist when I realized that when I walk down the street, if I see a group of black kids or I see a group of white kids, I feel different. And it was, and so it is in that sort of reality that we begin to, if we can really accept our shadow and say, yeah, a lot of people that like to, and look, I'm a recovering, I'm a racist, I am a misogynist, I'm recovering all of these aspects of my humanity. But, Yogananda, the great Indian guru, said, your job is not to go into the Himalayas and meditate until you're enlightened. You're in a body and you're in this world to be in this world. And part of being in this world and part of being in America is dealing with what there is to deal with. And if you just deny it and deny that you have feelings, or deny that you see race, or deny that you see sex, or deny that somebody is, that you have a shadow and you just love everybody. Facebook and social media is great for that. Like, everything's great all the time and I never have issues and it's all good and it's all love. And, weed is great for that too. People who smoke a lot of weed love to say, oh, it's all bliss all the time, but don't take their weed away from them. So, and look, I smoked weed when I was a kid. So
no judgment.
Yeah. But inside of that, what you're doing is you're actually denying your very lesson that you're here to learn. And the lesson I think that we're all here to learn, in my humble opinion, is that we're here to actually accept how we feel, accept that we are in different physical bodies, and through the process of diving into our differences, diving into the parts of our shadows, and really being able to realize that as I accept that I'm a racist and I'm a misogynist and I'm an a-hole many, many times, that in that I can actually forgive myself for my own humanity. Yes, and then I begin to transcend, and I can begin to look at other people in their humanity. And through that journey, I can actually experience transcendentalism. That's it. There is an aspect of me that has transcended race as a function of having 1,000 conversations and being called out on my racism 1,000 times by this incredibly beautiful, strong, powerful, kick-ass woman. That doesn't mean that I haven't still, another 100 years to go or whatever. But at the end of the day, it has been that journey of diving into my stuff and accepting all the dark, deep, wounded elements of me, of my race, of being a white man, of the entitlement, of being a man, of thinking I have all the answers as a man. All of those things, it's been, it's the aspect of me that has transcended it. It's been a function of doing the work and actually having those conversations and accepting my own, my own darkness.
And that's what I think, Howard, you so beautifully answered your own question by leading with your heart and being transparent and being open and just being willing to be humble. I mean, that is like one of the, spiritual principles. I mean, that's like part of the Eightfold Path of Liberation under any spiritual path, to just lead with that and know. And I guess on some level, you have to know and believe that there is a higher power that put you here and put you into these circumstances for a reason, for your liberation, for soul connection, that all of this is happening for a reason. Everything is happening for a reason. There are no mistakes. And if there's something I'm confronted against, if there's, something in my space that's making me want to resist, if I'm feeling anger, then, in my experience, just sort of the principle of 100% accountability. And I've had to bring this to myself every single day in this space, in the pandemic, with Black Lives Matter, with, just the transition of life and heading, into middle age and, over the hill, so to speak, to really say, okay, if there's something in my space where I'm feeling angry, then that's an area where I'm not taking accountability for something. That's an area that I may be pretending about something. No judgment, with compassion and love. It's coming from a divine source for my ultimate good. So what might that lesson be? And beginning to get curious with ourselves, like, let me actually treat myself, my life as a scientist might, and actually get curious about, well, what is it that I'm so pissed about? People in my neighborhood driving Range Rovers. There's a period where there's like a day where I'm so pissed that like every driveway had like 2 white Range Rovers in it. And I just found myself, Michael didn't care, but I just found myself thinking like, another Range Rover, and another. And I had to think, like, whoa, okay, this is not very peaceful. It's not very yogi, okay? You're cursing people out for having Range Rovers. It's ridiculous. Okay, it's not the most eco-friendly car. It's not a Prius. It's not a Tesla. But why are you so pissed about it? Like, even if that's true, like, that's for you. And then when you answer those questions, that's when it starts to get interesting, and there's a new found freedom possible on the other side.
Right. Yeah. So that answer it feels very much like a single-edged sword, in that it seems like it's a very honorable thing to turn towards yourself, and it feels like it could be the completely wrong thing to turn toward other people, for to say, well, if Black people are angry, they need to work on themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
No, well, yes, and that's beautiful. Thank you for like taking that universal truth, because universal truth is, one of the reasons why I became a lawyer, was not necessarily to work in corporate America forever, but to like bring divine universal law and divine justice to myself and to the planet. And that right there is absolutely true. Why am I angry? Why would I be angry at white people? Because there's anger and racism and hatred in my heart. Otherwise, it wouldn't be triggering for me to see it. Even if Michael and his ancestors were the worst, horrible, misogynistic, patriarchal, slave-owning racists, right, for 600 years. Why, if I have to hate him as a soul, forget what he did, that's his karma. If as a soul, I have to hate him and I'm triggered by that, there's something in me that is a perfect reflection of maybe not this lifetime. And I think to myself, I know multiple lifetimes, I'm sure I was a racist, I was a slaveholder, I was a patriarch, I was probably a rapist, I was a lot of things, because to the extent that, I haven't been raped in this lifetime, but to the extent, the energy of feeling like unsafe, the energy of feeling like, oh, your dark skin doesn't belong here. Oh, why are you here? The energy of being questioned, in rooms and in situations and on beaches where no one else was questioned, right? It's like, oh, there's the one Black person on the beach. I'm sure she's the one with weed and alcohol. Let's pick her out of 1,000 people. Like, I can be angry and be victim, and there was nothing in there, of course, because I was sober at that point. Not before, right? It's like, maybe that's the karma for all the years of craziness. But, that aspect of like, the universe abhors a vacuum. There's always, for every act there's an effect, right? For every cause, there's a consequence, and it may be previous lifetimes. And so we, as Black people, and this is one thing too, as we look into and sit in this Black Lives Matter culture, which is really important in these conversations, one conversation I'm not hearing a lot about is, and I think it can only come from a spiritual conversation, is like, we as Black people must look inside of ourselves and say, where are we racist? Where are we hateful? Where are we homophobic? Where are we misogynistic? You know what I mean? Some of the conversations and with some of my friends, my African-American female friends, and experiences they've had at the hands of Black men, right? You know, very patriarchal, very misogynistic. I'm not saying universally generalized all are, but it's like, you know, he who is without sin cast the first stone.
That's it.
And I think that is the work that we as Black people must do. And as white people do that work, right? We're all working on ourselves. We're coming together, not as I'm the victim and you owe me, though reparations is a real thing and it's going to happen because it's karma, right? But it just is. It's inevitable. But, you know, two whole sort of beings coming together to face each other to do the healing work, just like any dynamic, healthy relationship, there is so much healing and so much, you know, positivity that can happen out of that. But if you have two people saying, you're the one that can't, yeah, or one person having to be the one that's the blame and the wrong one and the bad white guy that has to sit there and just shut up and take it all, and the Black people can do, it's like that will only, there's a period where speaking truth is important, but there's a point where it's like, we're only going to get so far unless both sides do the deep spiritual work.
So I want to ask about that, because my you know, I'm a nice guy, right? So I was a nice racist, right? Like right. So like I really started taking responsibility in a different way. I want to say in September I was introduced to Ibram Kendi's work. Right, you know, how to be an anti-racist. I hadn't heard of him. A white friend of mine said, you've got to read his book. And I read his book, and like it really profoundly affected me in terms of seeing, because he was so humble himself about his own journey from being, you know, a light-skinned, you know, racist to making speeches as a teenager about how it's Black culture and baggy pants that's the problem, right? So to the whole gamut, like and he's also vegan, but I tried to get him on the podcast before he became like the best-selling author in America, but I didn't. But then, you know, so it really it made me kind of understand in a way that allowed me to be humble. It allowed me to look at myself and see, that thing I did was racist. And those words I spoke, like just sort of like to look at the movie, like to rewatch The Sixth Sense after you know the end. And it's like, now I see it all.
Totally.
Right? And the next thing I started reading was White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And I had such a negative reaction to that. Not because I don't think she's right about white fragility, not that I don't think she's right about systemic racism, but like her approach, it felt to me like it was a guilt-based approach that would never allow for transcendence. And I'm wondering, you know, is this another like asshole moment that I have to overcome, or is there something I'm onto?
How about both? How about both? You know, we live in a time of paradox, right? We are both evolving at a tremendous rate, and it seems like certain parts of society are devolving. You know, there's new life growing every single day, and there's millions of people dying like flies, you know, just dropping around the world. So we're constantly, you know, in the divine universal plan, there's always something that is, you know, birthing, there's something that's remaining the same, and there's something that's dying. And so all of the above are happening at the same time. And, you know, I think part of the opportunity at this time, you know, both with politics and Black Lives Matter and Me Too and gender, which, by the way, Black Lives Matter, cool, great, thank you. When women actually wake up and step into their power, it's going to be, I mean, that's where the world is going to explode and implode way bigger than this. That gender is one that is just, it's coming. So that's my little tidbit warning.
Foreshadowing.
Been foreshadowing that for a minute. It's like sleep. When that opens up, anyway, so get ready for that. I think we're preparing ourselves. All of that's happening is preparing ourselves for that. But, you know, my whole point is that at all times, if we step into the lower vibration of dogmatic positioning of this or that and sort of judging life by what we see with our senses and feel, we're going to miss the totality of the universal divine law and the divine picture, which is always moving us in ways that are beyond our intellectual understanding. So yes, I have heard and I can understand sort of the sense, as powerful and beneficial as White Fragility, the book is, that sense of sort of radical unforgiveness, which doesn't really create a space of compassion and opportunity for movement. Everything's always changing. And so to the degree that out of anger, and I can understand, a Black woman in America, a Black person being so angry that now I've got your attention and, I'm going to release some of this venom and you're going to take some of the pain. You're going to take some of the pain, buddy. You're going to take some of the poison because I got to put it somewhere.
Right. So emotional reparations are not karma, right?
Yeah.
Not in the...
Yeah. Yeah, there's an aspect of that, which can be very gratifying right now. It's like, oh, it's your white privilege. It's like, why? Because I didn't wash your dishes that you left in the sink? Oh, it's your white. It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
and
it's
she
like,
said that to me many, many times. So
it becomes spiritual, racial. I'm racially bypassing because I don't want to wash my dishes. But it's like, for 400 years, I had to wash the dishes. Now you're going to pick my cotton.
That's right.
It's we can say that to each other because we've been together so long, but there's an aspect of it where it's like you said, that fine line. At what point am I now sort of backsliding on my own spiritual journey? Your spiritual journey is your spiritual journey, and mine is mine. And when I get to the pearly gates or enlightenment or nirvana, I'm going to have to answer for, was I true and just and honest and in integrity with who I know I'm here to be, regardless of the social climate, regardless of the political climate, regardless of the fact that Black Lives Matter is trending. And so that's the opportunity that when this pendulum is a result of the pendulum that got started in colonialism in Christopher Columbus days and before. When the other pendulum of sort of the backlash to that, it's like all the hateful comments that Black people have made against white people just to sort of get the poison out. Okay, as cathartic as it is, there will be, a pendulum for that as well. So we have to be very mindful as spiritual practitioners, and also I think as white people, not to take on the guilt. And one of the things the first few weeks, Michael just felt like he was walking around with so much shame and just feeling so bad about himself. And I was like, stop making it about you and how you feel.
That's right.
Again, you know what I mean? Like that also can be very damaging to the spiritual path. So we have to be balanced in this and not get too dogmatic because we'll lose sight of the big picture.
Right. Like I felt like, I can't win. Like there's this feeling like, if I acknowledge what I'm feeling, that I'm centering whiteness again. Yeah, or right. like there's so many ways in which there are paradoxes that, right. So Michael, I have a question for you, as the person walking around with sort of guilt and shame and carrying it the way I have seen myself. So if there's a white pain body, and which is trauma, like if I was working with someone who was traumatized, the thing I wouldn't do, which Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, does, is when a white person now says, well, now I understand something about systemic racism, what should I do? Her answer is, the first question you need to ask yourself is, why is this the first time you're asking that question? Which to me is like, if someone is, is struggling, is mistaken, is wrong, and all of a sudden they get shown the light and they say, I want to do better, the first thing you do is, well, what took you so long, asshole? Right? So how do we deal with our own trauma without making it about our trauma?
Well, I mean, that's the $1 million question, Howard. That to me, that's the essence of white privilege. Is there is this aspect of, I don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, or I'm not willing to hold Black people's anger.
Yeah.
We've had so many conversations where I've had to hold, sometimes successfully, many times not successfully at all, her anger and her pain. Because at the end of the day, we as white people have been able to coast through this world. White privilege is not about like, a lack of having to work hard. It's not you didn't struggle. It's not that you don't work your butt off for what you have. It's not that you didn't have stuff to deal with in your life. That's not what white privilege is. It's specifically that says that you grow up in a world where your color is not the first thing that people see. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you're afforded certain privileges that people who have a different color than white people don't have. So at the end of the day, I believe our duty as white people is to say, yeah, you're pissed off. And yes, your book made me feel bad. And yes, you're like, what took you so long? Okay, let me take it. Yes, may I have another? I understand your pain, and I can't understand your pain, and I understand why you're pissed off. And it's my job, as this is my opportunity to take the high road. This is my opportunity to be the change I wish to see in the world, as Gandhi said. Gandhi had to take the high road, and in his own country, where the British white people were trying to, were colonializing him, he was able to transcend and create freedom for India because he took the higher road. And he said, you can kill us, but we're not going to strike back. And it's our opportunity as white people to say, you can spout all the violence and all the anger that you have at me, and I'm still going to love you. And I'm still going to appreciate you, and I'm still going to cry a tear for you, because that is my duty as a spiritual warrior. That is what I'm here to do. Christ said, love God with everything you have, heart, mind, soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say love your neighbor if they're the same color as you, but if they're not, don't. Or if they're trans or not. This is our spiritual duty. This is what liberation is. All the people that are spiritually bypassing or racially bypassing, all they're doing is locking it in the closet and saying it's not there. It is there. And it's going to show itself over and over and over again until we learn to accept it, open the door, and say, yes, you have every right to be angry. I'm still here, though. I still love you, though. And through that process, not only can we transcend the anger, but we can actually transcend ourselves as spiritual beings and actually have freedom, which is the greatest gift.
Yeah. So, Bianca, I have a question for you. When Michael does that at his best, holds the anger, is a spiritual warrior, working on his own liberation, does that lead to healing for you?
Absolutely. And I was feeling that and thinking that, like, as he was saying it, I just felt, and he's been himself from the minute I met him, but I just felt myself exhale. Like, it's like an aspect of the burden I've been carrying and having to, like, articulate or defend, or even not in words, but just energetically. It's like someone else is carrying that for me. When you come out of the grocery store and you got 20 bags, and someone offers to take a couple, I'm supported, and I don't have to do it all myself. And someone else can speak for me for once, and I can just rest for a little bit. I mean, the weathering effect for people of color, for African Americans, is a real thing. Their health outcomes are disparately worse as a function of nothing more than having a skin color, because of what has to be held, the pain body. And now, perhaps as part of the karmic swing, the cycle, we're spreading out some of that pain and allowing white people to hold it too. So now we're all holding it together. And what that does for me, it just opens my heart and makes me feel like I can trust him, like I'm being taken care of. And this is not just in a romantic relationship, but with my white friends that do the same thing. I just feel safe and held, and like, okay, now I can open up about, like, the next layer of what I'm struggling with and what I'm working on in my non-perfect state, as opposed to, okay, as soon as I walk in, they're wondering, like, how did you get here? And, like, what are your credentials? And, like, what was your GPA? And, like, what kind of car do you drive? Like, who are you? Where it's like, okay, you bristle and you're like, well, I went to Princeton. Okay, is that enough? Here's my resume. Can I get a pass? Or do I have to show you, like, my freedom papers? Like, that feeling I've had my entire life, including at Princeton, which you and I share that university. Like, oh my God. So grateful they're beginning to, because Eyes Gruber from the top down, I'm going to call him the principal, the president, is beginning to, like, have to kind of answer to these questions and tearing down the Woodrow Wilson School. I'm so sorry. But that sort of support, just, you feel like for the first time after decades of, like, walking like this, you know what I mean? You can start to put your shoulders down. And what kind of world, what kind of society, what kind of leader, what kind of creative can I be when I'm more open-hearted and more relaxed and comfortable in my own space? There's certainly less violence. There's certainly less fear on the planet. And that is something that he's offering by simply being willing to be the change and being willing to take the higher road. And in the words of St. Francis, instead of looking to be consoled, look to console. Instead of looking to be forgiven, can we forgive? Instead of looking to be understood, can we understand? And that is the difficult spiritual work that we're all being asked to do right now.
Oh, something just hit me when you gave me the St. Francis quote, which is like white guilt it's manipulative, isn't it? Like what Michael was just saying he wasn't diminishing himself in any way.
No. In fact, he aggrandized himself spiritually. He became bigger to me. He became brighter to me. He embodied the principle of unconditional love. And that is so magnetic. It's like and my guru says, love is the only weapon that cannot be withstood. It's like, yes, whatever you have to say next, I'll follow you wherever you want to go, because I trust you to be a leader and to take care of the flock. And the flock is our brothers and sisters. And that is what a good shepherd does. And each one of us has the opportunity to do that if we choose. It is hard work to put another, love thy brother as thyself. It's hard work. But that is the work that we're being called to do right now as we step into this time of 2020 vision. Lots being asked of us.
I love that.
And hey, God doesn't give you what you're not strong enough to handle. So, okay, time to graduate to the next level. AP, human consciousness.
Advanced perception, AP.
Advanced perception, yeah.
So I know you guys have a hard stop in just a couple of minutes, but what's and interestingly, my office door just blew open and there's a storm coming. So I don't know what that means. Yep, here it is. But there's a lot of white people who are still in denial, who are reacting in anger. I don't exactly think most of them are my audience, but there's a lot of white people who are now sort of waking up, and the first wave of shame and guilt and complicity and complacency. Yes. And so it is a feeling, like Michael was saying, of sort of like, I need to be consoled. I got to call all my black friends and make sure they still like me. Yeah. Right? Like, so let's accept that place as what is now. What are the steps to on the road to becoming this integral spiritual warrior?
I mean, I guess, for me, it's just step one is just really owning it. Is just fully owning your racism. Fully owning the ways that you perceive people as different because of how they look. And if that is step one, and a willingness to see your own darkness, the willingness to see your own shame, and just like you did, Howard, at the beginning of this call, a willingness to say it out loud and speak to it, whether it's on social media, whether it's to a black person that you know, or whatever, to speak to it. And then to say, what is your experience like? And what was your experience with this? And then just to listen. That's the biggest thing that I see that's not happening, is white people are not willing to listen. Again, as we talked about, like, hear the anger, hear what it was like to be pulled over at gunpoint because you're black. Hear what it's like to have, a child that, that you're worried about them getting killed in the street because of the color of their skin, if they played cops and robbers. And so I think that, for me, that's everything. If you can just own your own stuff and journal about it and look at it and then begin to share it, and then begin to ask powerful questions. Questions like, how was I racist to you in the past? Has there ever been anything I've said to you in the past that was racist or that was offensive? And then just sit with it and be with it. And as much as you can, try to recreate what that person is saying to you. Nonviolent communication is so powerful, because you literally say, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's the first couple steps. Yeah.
And I think all of that, out of the stillness emerges the light. And, like a glass of muddy water, I say this to many of my meditation yoga students. They're like, I can't meditate. All of these steps are impossible without a spiritual practice. It's impossible. And just sitting and learning how to sit still, the muddy water in the glass, when it's all shook up, there's no clarity. You can't see anything. It's confusing. It's disturbing. But in the stillness, if you just let that glass sit still, right? Eventually all the dust settles to the bottom and the water runs clear. And in that stillness, we can see ourselves, we can see the solutions, we can see that we are one. And it doesn't come without that. And we can't intellectually know it now. We have to be willing to walk a million miles in another person's moccasins and feel what that feels like, and be willing to go on the journey of not being able to control how we're going to react emotionally and what they're going to think, and manipulate them to think, to make sure that they think I'm not racist, and all these controlling things, and just trust the journey through the stillness and the listening and the introspection. You will get to the other side. And yeah, maybe as white people, you've never had to do that work before. Like they said to Neo in the Matrix, well, why do my eyes hurt, right? You've never used them before, Neo. So you'll get there. You're a superhero. You can do this, but it's going to take some training. Oh, your audio.
You're on mute, Howard.
Okay.
Sorry, the storm is very loud. But I was just saying, it's so much easier to just go to a protest and not do that work.
Yes.
Hold up a sign.
Yeah.
And if all else fails, just hold up a sign that says Black Lives Matter.
Right.
That's a step.
Yeah. I had the bracelet before it was cool.
Yeah. It's a step. It's one step. Right. Greg.
Well, I know you guys have to go, and gosh, thank you so much. I mean, people are going to be watching this and listening to this, but they're not in my head right now. Like I feel like you guys have given me such gifts of clarity and of direction and of grace. So I'm so happy that we met, that we've stayed in touch, and that we're on this journey together.
Yeah, us too. Thank you so much for giving this a space and a platform, and just for listening. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, and so it started because you guys sent out an email. So can you talk about how people can follow you and
yes, thank you.
Get your emails and be part of your world?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first you can watch Conscious Living, which is now on Amazon Prime, and it's 4th season. So if you have Amazon Prime, go watch it. You can visit us at consciouslivingtv.com, and we're on Instagram at consciouslivingtv, and Facebook at Conscious Living TV, and on Twitter at Conscious TV. So you can sign up for our newsletter on our website and get our lovely sort of journey to being the change we want to see, and that's everything from vegan fashion and food to eco travel and transcending racism. In a world that is evolving in the middle of a pandemic. So I think we're all on this journey, and we've got a lot of work to do. We'd love to do that with people who are committed to that work too.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you, Howard, and keep up your great work.
Well,
congratulations.
Thank you guys so much.
You're doing it.
I'll catch
Keep being the light. All right.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, Howard.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. I would love to know what you think about this conversation. You can comment on the blog at plantyourself.com/419, where you can also see the show notes, follow links. You should definitely check out consciouslivingtv.com for more of Bianca and Michael's beautiful, bright, hopeful, fierce spirits. Michael is also AKA Vegan Man. He also does a lot of cooking demos, and when they could, they traveled the world sampling vegan fare and vegan culture and compassion and ethical design, fashion, clothing, all that stuff. They're mostly just totally upbeat, generative, beautiful, positive souls, and they are bringing all that positivity to to the current climate and to the opportunities for healing our society. So next week, tune in. We're having a conversation about pregnancy and about why it might not be a great time to get pregnant right now, but it's an incredibly great time to get healthy in preparation for pregnancies. My guests are Jean Schumacher and Dr. Deborah Shapiro, who are the creators of the Pregnancy Advantage, and we talk about foods for pregnancy, supplementation, also toxins, the things in plastic, things in aluminum or tin cans, and personal care products, other things like that, and how to have a healthy pregnancy and bring a healthy soul into this pretty toxic, challenging world right now. So that'll be plantyourself.com/420 out next week. Garden news, the tomatoes are slowing down. I've been making sauce for the freezer, getting some green beans, edamame, not as many as we'd like, but just knowing each one is so finite, it makes them even more delicious. Still with the basil, and we got our first eggplant yesterday, and we got a pretty big watermelon that looked lovely till we cut it open, and it was basically tasteless flesh, but it was water. So if I were, dehydrated in the Kalahari and I came across it, I would probably be extremely grateful. Hoping we can next year improve the soil to bring up the flavor a bit. In running news, slow, steady, just keeping things going. I have been running differently in that after reading Breath by James Nestor, I am now only inhaling through the nose, which is slowing me down a lot. And hopefully I will continue to improve at that. I have an appointment this coming week with the offices of an airways dentist, Dr. Ryan Robinson, up in Delaware. So you can hear me breathing through my nose. They did a little Zoom assessment of me, or whatever the HIPAA-compliant version of Zoom is that they're using, and found that my nasal breathing is extremely labored and is probably causing me lots of problems. So I'm going up there for a workup on Friday, and I'll let you know how that goes. So thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as the theme music for this show. Hear it now? Check out willridenauer.com for more of his gorgeous Kora music. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Let me see, I'll do a little breath practice to say your names right now. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Morrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hathaway, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Burns, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Dina Ahern, Jen Filkanovsky, David Isaac, Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colin Peck, Michelle Andrews, Josina, Sarah Durkes, Rhonda Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, Kara Adams, Tom Franzek, Janet Benham, Gail Sarah, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Jew and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva L, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Amon, Molly Levine, the Inscrutable Harry R, Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Kelly Michia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch, Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Home Hedegaard, Isa Tuzanwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Power for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Mirani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Dan Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divit, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Bacorny, Stephen Leanan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunn-Marie Hagan, Tracy Gullers, Laura Heaton, Meg for Mama Says, Michelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael K., Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perriman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owens, Sagar Nayak, and Erica Piedra for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Mr. Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby. Hi, Janet. Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lassert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Nolly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch at Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Home Hedegaard, Izatu Wa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divich, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, and Michael Lushton for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.